All right, good afternoon. I see a few familiar Alderdice faces here. Welcome to Politics and Prose. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of the bookstore, along with my wife, Lissa Muscatine, and it really is a very special pleasure for me to be introducing Jodi Mitchel Tolman, who's here to discuss her memoir, one from each column, my 46-year trek from abusive childhood to elusive motherhood. Now, I say this as a special pleasure for me because, as some of you here know already, Jodi and I were classmates in high school in Pittsburgh. And not just classmates, but we had starring roles opposite each other in not one, but two plays our senior year, Funny Girl and Mame. Jodi actually had acting talent. How I got the parts, I'll never know. Those plays were the first and the last times that I ever sang or acted in public. Jodi, on the other hand, went on to California and for a time was making a career in the entertainment business. She landed some acting and singing parts, including work as a singing server at the legendary Improv. She also dated Larry David for a bit. Maybe she'll talk about that in a moment. But her most significant run in showbiz came eventually as a voiceover actor in a wide range of productions. All the while, the clock was ticking on Jodi's deep-seated desire to get married and have kids. And getting to that point took her through enough adventures, well, to fill a book. The journey, as she recounts, involved breaking free from a troubled childhood home, making her own way in the world, and finding the right husband, finally, after two false and difficult starts. Which one? Who's Jay? Okay, hi Jay, nice to meet you. She did ultimately become a mother, and here's where the story took an instructive twist. She became a mother three different ways. One with a genetic child, one with an adopted child, and one with a child born from a donor egg. Her aim in writing about those experiences, as she says at the start of the book, was to provide guidance and inspiration to those facing infertility and weighing options. Among the questions she addresses are, will I be able to love a child as much brought into my life through alternate methods as through natural means? Will that child bond and love me as deeply? Will children born differently but in the same family feel differently about one another? Jodi, ever the entertainer, has shaped her experiences into a memoir that's not only informative and illuminating, but also funny, engaging, and filled with example after example of her indomitable spirit. And conversation with Jodi will be Leslie Morgan Steiner, who's an author, consultant, and advocate, who by talking and writing extensively about her own life has sought to highlight such important issues facing women as domestic abuse, eating disorders, parenting, and work-life balance. Her fourth and most recent book, The Naked Truth, was a memoir that explores female aging and sexuality after motherhood and divorce. So please join me in welcoming Jodi and Leslie.
Thank you so much, Brad. Oh my God. That's all I can say is just, oh my God. And so I want to thank Brad and Lissa and the entire team here. I want to thank Leslie for her time and for her interest in coming and chatting with me and us about one from each column. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. And I want to thank my husband because none of this wouldn't be without him. And before we start, I just want to say a couple of words about Leslie's memoir, Crazy Love. If you have not read it, it's riveting, it's harrowing, it's It's incredibly uplifting and inspirational. And it's a very important book. And I wanted to thank you, Leslie, for writing it. And I want to thank you for the equally important work that you're doing. So thank you all for coming. I so appreciate it.
I'm Leslie, and Jodi, it is such a pleasure to be here with you finally. We were supposed to be here on August 18th, and I was a little worried about an event in DC in the middle of August. And so Jay really conveniently had a heart attack so that we could reschedule for now. And I'm so glad that you're fine.
And he's so thoughtful, too.
I know, just really like what a wonderful husband. I was completely thrilled when Politics and Prose asked me to join this discussion. It's always interesting to come across a writer that you have a lot in common with, but a lot of differences too. So Jodi and I both write memoir. We both have 3 kids. But we're different in the way that Jodi admits in the book, I don't even know if admits is the right word, but just acknowledges that she's a procrastinator and it took her 46 years to write this book. I'm the opposite of a procrastinator. Like, I started writing books as soon as I could hold a pencil. And Jodi chose to write in one very ambitious book something that it took me 3 books to cover: abuse, motherhood, and infertility, and the solutions to infertility. So bravo, Jodi. And unlike Crazy Love, this is such a fun, funny, very, very happy book. And I just loved it, and I am really thrilled to be in this discussion. Jodi is going to read a section of the book to kick it off. Then I'm going to ask her a couple of questions. And then if there's time, she's going to read another little section, and then we'll open it up and you guys can ask whatever you want. Is everything fair game?
Oh, my goodness, absolutely everything.
So the first section is chapter 30, one from each column, starting on page 169. You can take it from there, Jodi.
This begins the wrap-up of my book, and chapter 30 is called A Few Last Thoughts. Oh, no, I'm in the wrong place, sorry. That's a good start. Chapter 30 is called, as Leslie just said, one from each column. And this is the origin story of this book, so it's I think, maybe worth knowing. I ran into my friend Helene in Princeton when I was pregnant with Jack and told her my happy news. After receiving her heartfelt congratulations, accompanied by lots of hugs and kisses, I shared that I would soon have a genetic kid, an adopted kid, and a kid born from a donor egg. And she said, "Wow, that's amazing. You should write a book. You should call it One from Each Column." I thought that was a fabulous idea and a compelling title. I'm going to do that, I thought. I'm a decent writer. I have something to offer in my story. I'm definitely going to do that. It could really be helpful to people who are trying to build their family through alternative methods. I have a unique perspective that could shed light and uplift. I'm absolutely going to do it. And that was now 27 years ago. I tend to procrastinate. But procrastination can create opportunity. My kids are grown. I'm writing what will likely be my first and last book. Procrastination in this endeavor gave me the great gift of perspective and a driving motivation to put it all down. So here's what I know, and I know it because I lived it. Parenting is a fusion of actions, thoughts, fears, worries, hopes, goals, desires, intentions, responsibilities, disappointments, and dreams. Thousands of dissimilar moments, all at once and one at a time. Realizations, confusion, understanding. While pregnancy is wondrous, it does not make us parents. If pregnancy is carried to term and culminates in a birth, it makes a mother or father. not a parent. Parenting is in the doing. My mother was with me when Charlie was newborn, as I changed my first diapers. She stood next to me as I gagged over one that was particularly grotesque, causing me to breathe through my mouth. Chatting while changing, my mom could hear I was holding my nose and said, "Honey, this is your son." I replied, "Mom, this is shit. Hideous shit." Changing a diaper like that without puking all over your baby is parenting. Sitting up all night with your kid as he cries inconsolably is parenting. The first kiss from your child, the first hug, the first word, the first step, the first peals of laughter, the first ice cream, broccoli, injury, nightmare, the first day of school, the first play date, the first team tryout, the first bike, the first lie, defiance, mischief, obstinance, punishment, song, dance, drawing, day of camp, puppy love, puppy heartbreak, driver's license, car accident, prom, formal dress, tuxedo, the first application to college, the first rejection, the first acceptance, the first day, the first job application, job interview, the first offer, ad infinitum is parenting. I could fill another book with a million pieces of parenting, and it's all learned on the job with quite the curve.
Bravo. So good. I love that section. So, a lot of people have ideas for books. I would say 100 times people have said, "Oh, I have a great idea for a book." And when you've actually written books, it becomes like very painfully clear that there's a huge, huge difference between having an idea for a book and thinking you have a great title and a great story and actually writing the book. And choosing to make it a book instead of an article or a comedy skit or, a TED Talk. So you've been so many different things: an actor, singer, comedian, voiceover artist, and, as Brad said, Larry David's girlfriend. Can you tell us why and how you were compelled to write a book and what sort of saw you through the process? Because it's so much more difficult than most people think, to just sit there day after day and write and write and write.
I love this question. I'll tell you the truth. What got me to sit down, as I like to say, sit my ass down, and finally, after 27 years, start to write, was my very deep-seated sense of competition. Another author that I knew, a former neighbor who knew Jay's and my story of infertility, said to me one day off the cuff, "Oh, Jodi, by the way, I've been meaning to tell you, if you don't write your story, I'm going to write it as fiction." And I thought, oh, I don't think so. And no kidding, that night, and now this book, to be fair, this book has been in my heart and my soul and my gut and my mind for decades. But when she said that to me, I thought, okay, clearly now's the time. And what was astonishing, the book that I intended to write was not this book. The book that I intended to write was Jay's and my story about our battle with infertility and how we went through that and triumphed. But soon after I started to write, it came pouring out of me, my life story. And I realized that I couldn't tell that piece without the reader knowing that piece. And it just came out of me in a way that I couldn't stop. And people have asked me, how did you find the discipline? None of that was at play. I just had to get it on paper, more to the point, into my iPad. And so that's how this book came to be.
What a fascinating answer. Yeah, good. I think that it's an amazing thing when you sit down to write one book and it morphs into another. It's more common than people think. So my next question has to do with being a woman. I've spent my whole life, studying women, starting with my mom, and the choices women make, the pressures we face. My first job out of college was at 17 Magazine, so I studied teenage girls and what they deal with, which is a lot. So Jodi, you've had so many, like an astonishing number of what I consider to be defining experiences of being a woman. An abusive marriage, abortion, pregnancy, infertility, adoption, postpartum depression. I mean, it goes on. 3 marriages and 2 divorces by age 40. That is a lot. I mean, I happen to believe that every woman goes through a ton in her life and that every woman has a really great story to tell, but you have like 20 great stories to tell. So my question for you is, what qualities in yourself helped you to quote unquote survive these quintessentially female experiences?
This is the quintessential question for me, because this is the defining moment. And I am convinced that being abused as a kid was the best thing that ever happened to me. Of course, I didn't think so at the time. And it wasn't until 60 that my therapist first used the word abuse. And then I started to unpack it and come to terms with all of it. But when I was 6 years old, my parents used to have really loud, very frightening arguments. And when they did, I would arguments. I can see somebody when they're struggling, because I struggle so often. So let me know if you can't hear me, anybody. So they were having an argument, and when that happened, I would hide under the dining room hutch. I was really little when I was little, and I could fit under there, and that was my little safe space where I would wait out the storm. And I remember one day in particular that, and I honestly don't know if I manufactured this memory or if this actually happened, but it seems to me that it did. This particular day, I was sitting under there and I was terrified. There was so much fear. I was living with so much fear as a kid. And on this particular day, as I sat under the hutch, I started to think on an endless loop were questions that I actually didn't want the answers to. And the questions were, do my parents know that I've been under here for quite some time? Do they know I'm gone? Why, I'm 6. Why aren't they looking for me? And if they do know I'm gone and aren't looking, what does that? And as I was having all of these, really unsettling questions and thoughts, as the fear was rising, my fury was rising faster. And that's the defining moment. I ended up so pissed off, and I lived my life pissed off. My cousin was a brilliant writer. She was a feature writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the longest continuous running newspaper in the country. She was brilliant, and she once wrote a family story, and she described me in her piece as standing with my hands in fists with my chin jutted out, and my teeth. That's how I lived my life, and I'm absolutely convinced that the grit and the fury and the perseverance and the resilience and the persistence and the ferocious resilience that was forged in me in the pain of abuse. And that's what got me through my entire life. Every single challenge, every single scare, every single horrible choice, life-threatening decisions, all of it, that's what got me through.
I love that answer, and I totally agree that anger can be very dangerous, and anger, I think particularly in men, is something that is terrifying, maybe to me in particular, maybe to all of us. But anger in women is surprisingly motivating. And the Crazy Love, my memoir about surviving an abusive marriage, the reason I wrote it was exactly what you described. I was so angry I was so angry at every single person who said to me, not knowing that I had been in an abusive marriage, you know, why doesn't she just leave? And it made me so pissed off that I was like, I'm going to tell them why I didn't just leave.
Exactly. And if I can just interject one
Please.
thought, fear is a debilitating emotion. And the phrase I use in the book is, that was the day that I realized that fear could cripple me and fury would save me. And so, and there's no question that anger, the kind of jumping up and down, spitting blood, crazy anger, we have to learn how to temper it and use it for our own good. And that took a while as well. But, and I used to think, I'm so angry, I can't be such an angry person. And then finally I decided, oh, no. That's who I am. That's how I've lived, why I've lived. And so I still embrace it. Clean, healthy energy, anger energy.
I want everybody to keep in mind, every time you see a 6-year-old child, that's what you were experiencing at 6. I mean, that kids go through really powerful things, and they're being forged, their whole lives are being forged by experiences like that. I'm glad that yours had such a happy ending, starting out in that way. So taking the same set of experiences that you went through, I want to turn the question around a little bit. Not just what in yourself helped you survive it, but what kind of outside support did you get? You know, through teachers or adults or friends or therapists or Jay or strangers. What did you get outside of yourself that helped you get through all those experiences?
The driving force through my childhood and through my whole life until she was gone and after was my mother. Had it not been for my mother, I would have become a very different person. And so that was the support that anchored me. And I think I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be, my mother dubbed me at a young age, Sarah Heartburn. And for those of you who are old enough to have known Sarah Bernhardt, she called me Sarah Heartburn. And I knew that I was destined for greatness as a performer. And I was funny. And so I think it was those attributes in me that attracted people to me. And those were the people who saw me for what I hoped I could become. That was a huge part of my support. And it wasn't until much later in life that I got the kind of professional support that I needed from my therapist. Though I'd been in and out of therapy for many, many years, it was when I was 60, it was my therapist saying no, because I would describe my family is violent and scary and loud and insane and crazy, but I never used the word abusive, and my therapist finally did. And so she was the linchpin in all of this. And then writing the book was the most cathartic and therapeutic and revelatory experience I could have had. And that was what really pushed me out into the sunlight on the other side of it all.
You know, people will often say that writing a memoir is a kind of therapy, and it's just so completely true. To do a deep dive into yourself and to try to explain yourself and to the world is extremely therapeutic and really healing and lasting, I have found.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a little bit about the book, you know, taking some turns differently than what you thought would happen at first, and we've talked about it being cathartic. But what else surprised you about it? Was it easier to write, harder to write? Did you go back and edit it a lot? Like, what was the whole process about, and what surprised you during that process?
I think the biggest surprise was that the realization that I had to write it, that I had to get it out into the world. Well, I don't know about into the world. I had to get it out of my system. I had to get it where I could see it and read it and refine it and, yes, edit. I edited through the entire process. I was very fortunate to have a friend who's a writer who did a first pass edit. So, but what was surprising was the clarity. I'm just coming to this for the first time. What was so surprising was the clarity. And this was what was so therapeutic, I think, because I could see my dad in his entirety, not just as the abuser. I could see my whole family system in its entirety with clarity, because as you write a memoir, clarity is critical. You must distill it all in some way that makes sense and that's true. And that was shocking to me, how much I learned, how much I understood, and what was maybe the greatest shocker of all was in really coming to understand my dad, I was able to finally and fully forgive him. And the result, the effect of all of that was that I'm 73 years old. For the first time in my life, I'm comfortable in my skin. I spent my life thinking I was stupid and I wasn't good enough and I would never be good enough and nothing I did wasn't right and I didn't deserve. That's all of that bullshit. And the writing of this book made me able to write a new narrative for myself and really see myself and understand that that's not who I am. This is who I am. And so here I am, comfortable. What do you know? Oh, thank you.
When you're writing a book, it's an incredibly private experience. It's you and the iPad, or you and the computer, or you and the paper. And for some writers, myself included, it's always a bit of a shock when the book is published, because especially if you're writing about really personal things, all of a sudden you're out there in the world with this very personal stuff that was just so private before. Has anything surprised you about the reception to the book? And could you talk about that a bit?
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you what's been shocking, beyond surprising. Shocking has been how many people just who've read the title. I mean, people in the bakery, at the market, and strangers. How many people have said to me, "Oh, I experienced that. Oh, I went through that." And I think for the first time in my life, I realized how rampant child abuse is, how rampant infertility is, how pervasive so much of what I experienced is for so many people. That was absolutely shocking.
The CDC estimates that 15 million children in the United States are abused every year. And I'm sure that number is very underreported. And 1 in 3 women will be abused, physically abused by an intimate partner at some point in their lives. So it's incredibly common, but still very much a taboo subject, and also something that honestly just doesn't come up in conversation.
It's true.
And it's a great thing about having a book about the subject, because then you have a reason to connect with other people in a really deep level. And that's wonderful.
And if I can just add, that's been one of the most, what you just touched on, Leslie, has been one of the most wonderful outcomes of all of this, because as I meet people, as I talk to people about my book, about my story, the door just is flung open, and you connect on such a human, heartfelt, soulful level with people. It's just wonderful.
So This book is about motherhood, really, in so many ways, ostensibly. But we've talked very little about your children,
Yeah.
which is funny to me. So I'd like to spend a minute talking about your kids by asking you this question. If each of your 3 kids were to write a memoir, what would they write about?
Oh my God.
And how would you guys react?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. And the answer is I don't have a freaking clue. I could probably guess what Jack, our youngest, would write about, because Jack is the most open and, comfortable sharing his thoughts and how he thinks and what he wants and so on and so forth. Chloe, our middle, our adopted. Are you a Chloe?
No, I have a Jack and a Chloe though.
Oh my God!
She's Hannah.
That's amazing. So Chloe plays life closer to the vest than anyone I've ever known. And she is extremely enigmatic and a very fringy, out of the box, just unique individual. I've never known anyone like her. And I know what I know. The little I know about Chloe and understand about Chloe is the little she's wanted to share. So, but I would guess that Chloe would write her origin story. I would guess that Chloe would write about being adopted. I don't know if you would agree with that, honey, but that would be my guess. Jack would write purely political. Jack is me. He's a political junkie. He's not happy at the moment. And so my guess is that, and that's the world he lives in. Charlie is our eldest from my second marriage. And he is right brain, left brain, right down the middle. He's an artist. He's brilliant. He's a research scientist. He's many, many things. And I think he would probably write about his life as an artist. We're hoping that he will be offered a Fulbright scholarship, which he's in the midst of applying for, and will spend a year in the Czech Republic studying glass. He's a glass artist, so I think he would write about his art.
Thank you. My final question. What advice do you have for other writers with the burning desire to tell their stories?
The first thing that I would want people to internalize is the knowledge, is not just the confidence, but really knowing that people need to hear their story. And Leslie's absolutely right. Every single person out there has a story to tell, and knowing, because as I described, the experience of telling your story enables other people to, it opens a door for them to tell their story. So first, the realization that their story is critically important for people to hear, for who knows why, any one of a million reasons. And then I would say all of the things that come with so many different things, but certainly writing, the imposter syndrome, and I've spent so much time thinking, who the hell's going to want to know what I think? Who gives a who cares about what I experience? And I really worked so hard to put that aside and just think, I know that there are people that can be helped by and I'll tell you one last really quick story, because this will describe what drives me and what my mission is. When I was 11, I asked my mother if Jewish girls could grow up to become nuns. And she said, I don't know, but perhaps. And why do you want to be a nun? And I said, well, and Mother Teresa was very much in our consciousnesses at that time, and I said, well, it seems to me, and I'm an absolutist in my thinking. It's all or nothing, it's black or white, there's no gray for me. And I said to my mother, well, it seems to me that nuns live the most selfless lives on the planet. That's all they do, is devote themselves in their entirety, in every morsel of their being and minute of their day in service of others. That's what I want to do. And of course, that dissipated by the time I was 11 and a half. And then, so when I realized, and this is coming back around, when I realized that my story could be helpful to people, that was what really drove me. That was the second driver, to get it out of my system and to get it out to where it could maybe be helpful to someone.
Thank you, Jodi. So before we move into the Q&A, I've asked Jodi to read another section of the book. The book is so funny. She's a very, very funny writer. And I laughed out loud so many times reading it. And so I've asked her to read a couple of paragraphs from chapter 23, Jack the Ripper, that I especially loved. So go for it.
Thank you, Leslie. And thus, in the year of our Lord, 1998, 18 years after the decision was made, on that fateful bed, in that consequential apartment, on that pivotal day, the third and final column had its entry. One genetic, check. One adopted, check. One from a donor egg, check. The gaggle was complete. Not huge, but blissfully complete. I was 46 and felt 96. But I had to bounce back to 26. I had no choice. When I told Jay a year later that I'd love to adopt another baby, he said, "You'll have to do that with another husband." And I said, "Don't tempt me."
Thank you. So we can move into Q&A. And are we going to use the big mic, or do we have a pass-around mic? Okay, great. We have a pass-around mic. So why don't people raise their hands if you have a question, and we will bring you a mic. And Jodi said you can ask anything.
Anything at all.
I'll start it off. So how did the fact that you had three kids who came into the world in different ways, conceived differently, how did that affect the dynamics of the family, the way they related to each other, or the way that you and Jay related to them?
Okay, I couldn't hear you, Brad. Leslie, can you tell me what Brad asked me?
So you had three different kids born in three different ways,
Yeah.
as you know.
Yep.
How did that affect the family dynamics? And did they feel differently in the family? Did you and Jay parent them differently? Like, just it's it's not as unusual as we might think, but it's again the kind of thing people don't really talk about.
Right.
So tell us what it was really like behind the scenes.
It seems to me, and I think you would agree, honey, it seems to me that it was remarkably normal. There was, and I talk in the book, and I know this is not the experience for everyone, but for us, there was zero difference in how we bonded with and loved and raised these kids. There was exactly, in fact, I would find myself from time to time thinking, now Chloe was adopted, and I would find myself thinking from time to time, did I have morning sickness with Chloe like I had with Charlie? And then I think, oh, for God's sake. So there was zero difference. And I think if we were to ask them the same question, I think because Charlie's father and I were divorced, he has two siblings in his father's family, and I think Charlie would say that there's no difference in how the bonds he feels with all of his siblings, one from the other. It was just a matter of fact. It was just our normal.
Something that I've seen when I was researching The Baby Chase, which is a book that I wrote about infertility and surrogacy, is that people who face any kind of infertility, they make the best parents ever because they're so enthusiastic. And it sounds like that's how you guys approached this, that you were very enthusiastic and exuberant and had a lot of love. And it worked. Okay, other questions?
This is my friend Nancy, who I've known for 150 years.
Hi, Nancy.
Hello. When you said you had the idea 27 years ago to write this, and it took 27 years, did you have journals in the meantime or notes, and how did you really remember everything that's in the book?
Somebody else asked me that question. How did you remember all of this? And no, I never journaled. I have ADHD. I don't have the patience to journal. I've been wanted to be a writer since 4th grade when I wrote a story in school that was really stupid and hilariously funny. And I tried to write a blog some years ago. And so, no, I kept no notes. I had no framework. It just came out. And I almost feel a little sheepish about saying that, because I know that for so many people, writing, it just doesn't happen that way. But that's how it happened for me. Thanks, Nance.
Other questions?
Talk about Larry David.
Talk about Larry
I so
David.
appreciate that.
Yeah, talk about Larry David.
Talk about Larry David. So I was a singing server at the Improv in LA and then in New York. And Larry would come in with all the other comics to work out material and to perform. And I and the other singing servers, we would take our aprons off, put our trays down, and go up on stage and sing between the comics. So Larry David and I met at the Improv in New York, and we soon started to date. And Larry David is exactly what you see. That's Larry David. On Curb Your Enthusiasm, by the way, that is Larry David. And he's one of the great misanthropes of all time, and the funniest person I ever knew. And we had the best time. We were just laughed our asses off for 6 months. We dated for 6 months. And then one day he said to me, "I have to break up with you." I said, What? He said, "Yeah, I have to break." I said, "Why?" He said, "You remind me of my mother." I was 23. Jewish, yes, but 23, so come on. So we just had the best time, and it was hard to let him go. But we remained very close friends for a very long time.
Well, you later met his mother.
What's that?
Did you meet his mother?
Yes, I met. Certainly, no worries. I met his mother. We were dating at the time, and we gave her a ride home to Long Island. So I was in the front, she was in the back seat. She was about this big. You could barely see her over the back seat. And Seinfeld at this point was very successful. And I turned around and I said to her, "Oh, Mrs. David, you must be so proud of Larry and his success with Seinfeld." And she said, "You know, it's fascinating. I never thought he was funny." I never thought he was. In 6 words, he was explained to me. And I realized the origins and the entire life. And he thought that was hilarious that she said that, as did I. So yeah, that's his mother.
Does he know that you've talked about him in this book?
That's a really interesting question. Larry, in my life, once he and I sort of drifted apart, we've had no contact. So I think he must know, because I'll tell you another quick story if there's time. There was an author was brought into our temple, an author who wrote a book called something like The Secrets of Old Jewish Men, something like that. So this was a Jewish writer. He was invited into our temple to do a talk on his book. And he mentioned and the social hall was full of all these people that Jay and I knew, and they're our temple our fellow congregants. So we went, and this guy, in the course of talking about his book, mentioned that he and his dad had an apparel company, and they provided some costuming, some apparel for Curb Your Enthusiasm. And so that was the high sign. So when he was done and all the questions were asked of this gentleman, I said, "Well, if I could offer something, I'd like to." And I stood up, And I told the Larry David story about how he broke up with me. And at the end of it, after everybody was gone, he asked me, could he record me telling that story? He'd like to put it on his Instagram page. I said, sure. So I tell this story being videoed, and maybe 3 days later, our daughter, Chloe, calls me and says, you've gone viral. I said, what are you talking about? She said, your Larry David video. It's got 10,000 views, and it was shared 15,000 times. And I mean, how ridiculous is that? So I have to think that Larry, because this guy is good friends with Jeff, I forget his real last name, but played Jeff Garland on the series. And so I have to think that circuitously Larry learned that. And then I thought when I was publishing my book and I was writing my bio, I thought, I never tell anybody that I dated Larry David. A cousin of mine called me up and she saw the Instagram. She said, how come we didn't know this? How come nobody in the family knows that you did? I said, well, it doesn't really work itself into, just common conversation. And so then when I was writing my bio, I thought, you'd be an idiot not to put in your bio that you dated Larry David. And so I did. So if he knows, I have no idea, but I would guess he does.
Maybe you'll show up in
that wouldn't be
one of his
bad.
shows.
Okay, so it's been 55 years, Jodi, since you and I were on stage together in Funny Girl and Mame, and it was even at our 50th anniversary, 50th reunion, a move afoot that I'd learned about later to get us both to perform together. It's a good thing that I hadn't heard about that beforehand. But I just wonder how profound effect that those productions have on you.
Much more profound than you can ever imagine, because it was the pinnacle of my career. I was a star in Pittsburgh, in Squirrel Hill, did not be on Squirrel Hill, mind you, but I was a star in Pittsburgh, and it was all downhill from there.
Same here.
Well, hardly, but perhaps in the performing category, but otherwise not so much. But it was, but to circle back, that had it played a huge role in my being able to become who I was, because I was invisible other than with my mom, I was dismissed, and I was just something less than visible in my house. And performing and just making my presence known, I was a big mouth. I had a big mouth, and I was always getting in trouble. I wanted people to know I was there. And performing was the good way that I did that. And so that had a huge impact on how I survived my life, and how I had so much fun and loved my life at the same time.
Any more questions? Oh, good. 2 more. Great.
Thank you. One question for you. Having faced parenthood 3 times, for those of us considering parenthood, what advice would you give from all of your experiences with all of these 3 kids in different ways?
In terms of parenting?
In terms of parenting.
Somebody asked me recently a similar question, what advice do I have for anybody? And I answered it, this is the advice that I have for anybody in any realm of life. And that is the profound importance of having an open mind. Because as soon as you start to make decisions that sort of cut things off or cut people out or limit what you think is good or possible or likely, or then you're doing yourself and you're doing the people you might be doing that with or to a tremendous disservice. So Jay and I were very fortunate because our by nature, we are open-minded people, and whatever our kids wanted. I mean, my criteria was as long as it did not involve their safety, their health, or their general well-being, I was fine with it. So Chloe wanted to start dyeing her hair when she was, 9? And I said, and somebody, the mother of a friend said, "You're letting her dye her." I said, "It's, for God's sakes, it's hair. It'll grow. Who cares?" So I just, and this, Rachel, this is even more important. I realized, and I think I knew this because of how I came up, and I had so little control as a kid. The more control you can give your children, the more power you can give your children, the less they will rebel, the more confident they will be, and the more able to navigate their lives they will become. And you do that. I think there are lots of different ways to do that. Ask their opinions, take their advice, let them know that you want to know, that you have a need to know what they think about this, that, or the other thing. Listen to them, and don't impose yourself. To the extent that that's possible, don't impose yourself on them. They're individuals.
I would add to that something really obvious based on the book is to have fun with it. People don't talk enough about how incredibly fun parenthood is. It's, one of my best friends said when I was pregnant with my first child, she said, "Oh, this is so great, you'll never have to watch television again." Because the kids are so entertaining. Every single thing they do is fun and funny, and you guys obviously had a lot of fun with it, and it's just transformative. And so I'd say give it your all and really enjoy it. Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Well, it's a question comment. So first I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think removing the stigma around the circumstance that you found yourself in is a gift. It's a gift to people that are afraid to expose themselves because of the shame. So I thank you for that, because that takes courage, and it takes a deep and profound love of yourself and for others. And to offer that kind of service is, the trauma is the humanity part, which kind of foisted upon you, but what you chose to do with it is a life well lived, and I thank you for that. I think it's just remarkable, and I think the more voices that not only support you but come out, because it's like she said in the opener that 15 million children are abused a year. We come past somebody on the street and not know it, so you're a real treasure. And I think that your gift of humor is the great comics. They have that other side, that hidden side, and I think you're have all the aspects and trademarks of being a great actor, because it is that kind of honesty and truthfulness, but letting yourself be seen. So I don't really have a question. I just want to know when you moved from being fearful to fearless.
How wonderful.
Thank you so much for that. I will say that, this is nothing original. This is not an original thought. We've heard this from a million people in a million different ways, but I have learned, and I really want people to understand that we have zero control over the hand we're dealt, and we're dealt many different hands throughout our life. Zero control. We have 100% control over what we choose to do with the cards in our hand. That's everything. And in terms of humor, I've discovered that when things have been the darkest and the blackest in my life, that's when I'm at my funniest. That's when the comedy writer comes out and just sort of makes it all manageable.
That's a great note to end on, Jodi. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Politics and Prose. Jodi is going to be here to sign books and talk more. And just congratulations and thanks again for including me in this.
Oh my God, I can't thank you enough. And you, Brad, thank you both so much. Thank you all so much. I had a ball.